It's nothing short of a rout. Ukraine's two-pronged counteroffensive has expelled Russian troops from a large swathe of territory in the northeastern part of the country at lightning speed. In under a week, the Ukrainian forces regained more territory than Russia captured in over 5 months. Blindsided and on the defensive, Russia has responded by striking power plants, plunging much of the northeast of the country into darkness. We're asking, Ukraine's battlefield gains, Putin under pressure? Hello and welcome to The Point. It is a pleasure to greet our guests. Vendeline von Bredow is European business and finance correspondent for the Economist magazine. Jörg Lau is foreign affairs correspondent at the German weekly Die Zeit. And it's very great pleasure to welcome my colleague Vladimir Esipov back. He works with DW's Russian language desk. And Vladimir, the Ukrainian offensive seems to have caught the Russian forces and leadership entirely off guard. Should be that the case?
It is. Russians were took off guard indeed, but I would not talk about it like a turning point of this war, because it's too early to say. But it's a huge success for the Ukrainian army, huge and very important signal for the Ukrainian politics and for the Ukrainian population in any way.
And what is the lightning speed of this campaign? Tell us about the state of Russian forces.
It tells us a lot about the state of the Ukrainian forces, first of all. Ukrainian forces are able to, with the foreign intelligence, obviously with the foreign weapon systems, to push back Russians from huge territories. And they were completely surprised, took by surprise by these possibilities of the Ukrainian army.
Vendeline, this has been one of the biggest, if not the biggest, counteroffensive since World War II in Europe. The Russian retreat has been chaotic. The Russians have left ample supplies of both ammunition and military kit behind, to the delight of Ukrainian forces, of course. But expelling occupying forces is one thing. Actually retaining newly won territory is another. Do you think Ukraine can do it?
Yeah, I'm not sure. And I'd be also careful not to make too much of, to say it's a turning point. I don't think it is yet. I think it's comparable to, at the very beginning, Russia thought they could take Kiev within days, and then the whole thing would be over within a week. And there was a big defeat. Now this is the second big defeat of this whole campaign. But Russia still occupies about 20% of Ukraine's territory. So, we still have a long way to go. And I think it'll become a war of attrition. Sadly, I don't think that's changed.
Let me ask Jörg to comment on exactly that. President Zelensky, Ukrainian president, made a surprise visit to the city of Izium this week and said that his troops, quote unquote, will press on. Izium is viewed as a gateway to the industrial part of the east, to the industrial region of Donbas, which, of course, has been the main focus of Russia's ambitions. Would you say that the Ukrainians have a good chance of building on the momentum to actually make real inroads there?
I think so. Izium is a very important logistical hub for defenders. It used to be one for the aggressors. And this is a major step for them. But also the appearance of Zelensky on scene. I mean, contrast that with Putin basically sitting in a bunker all the time. And that's such a different way of, presenting your case to the world public that I think this also makes a huge difference also for Ukrainians and for the spirit of the defenders there.
Vladimir, do you think Putin's aims for the Donbas are doomed?
No. I would hope yes, but I'm afraid not yet, because it's just one step or one episode in this very long war, and we should not expect that the war is over in the next weeks. So the Russian government and the Russian establishment and President by himself communicating through his press person in Moscow, communicating even further that Russia will follow the goals set for this special military operation. So the Russians does not or didn't give up the goals, which is like removing of the Ukrainian government and denazification, so-called denazification of the Ukraine. The destruction of the civil and military infrastructure is going on, as we see after the counteroffensive in Kharkiv region. Russia struck the power plants, Russia struck the dam in Kryvyi Rih. So it's the horror is going on, and the goals are the same, still the same.
And let's drill a bit deeper on that and take a closer look at a counteroffensive that stunned not only Russian forces and politicians, but also Western military experts.
Shattered Russian tanks and positions. They testify to the force of the Ukrainian attack, but also to the element of surprise in the rapid advances. With this coup, Kyiv's troops recaptured huge sections of territory in eastern Ukraine within a short period of time. The Ukrainian president currently speaks of more than 6,000 square kilometers. According to military experts, Ukrainian territorial gains thus exceed those of the Russians for 5 months in less than a week. On the one hand, the counteroffensive testifies to the military competence of the Ukrainians and the effectiveness of Western weapons systems. But it also highlights the desolate state of the Russian military. Moscow, on the other hand, speaks only of regrouping its troops to reinforce its units in the Donetsk region. But observers now even no longer rule out a rapid collapse of the Russian war machine. Are the recent successes of the Ukrainian military the longed-for turning point in this war?
And Jörg, let me put that question straight away to you, because we've heard both of the other guests say it's not a turning point. How do you see it?
Well, it's militarily, it might not be the turning point of the war, but it's very important because it's the first time we've had good news from the battlefield in very many months. And it's very important for the Ukrainians going into that winter that will be very hard for them, also for Europeans, but for the Ukrainians it will be very hard. And to make sure that Western support will not dry up, it's very important for them to present these successes now. So I think in that sense it might be not a turning point, but a very important point in the campaign.
I want to talk a little bit about, before we come to the West, I want to talk a little bit about what all this means for Vladimir Putin. And interestingly enough, since this counteroffensive, Vladimir, there has been noteworthy criticism of Putin at home, as well as abroad, of course. But tell us a little bit about the voices you're hearing at home in Russia.
What is remarkable, I mean, the news of the dozens of small deputies of the small Russian opposition politicians in Moscow and St. Petersburg who are demanding the resignation of Putin. It's not really new. It's very big courage people, but this is not new. What's really new is the voices from the hardliner, from really military hardliner, from Ramzan Kadyrov, the president of Chechnya, who is demanding the rethinking of the Russian military strategy in the Ukraine, and who was able even talking about visiting Moscow and talking to the leadership of the Russian military by himself. This is very important signs of the parts of the Russian military establishment, of the part of Russian hardline not being happy with what's happening in the Ukraine at all. And it's very strong signals on the right side in Russia.
What would you expect it to mean for Vladimir Putin? How would you expect him to react?
I would be surprised to the moon that if he is not escalating the situation even further. I'm not sure in which form it will be happening, but it will be the next step of escalation to the wars, I would expect.
Vendeline, would you agree with that assessment?
Sadly, yes, and we've already seen it. You know, the Russians have bombarded critical infrastructure, power stations, a dam. You know, this is very painful for the civilian population. So in some ways, the escalation has already started.
We'll come back to that as well in a moment. But Jörg, let me ask you about your assessment of the political situation in Russia. Your paper this week published an opinion piece by the Russian historian Vladimir Karamurza, who reminds us that in the past, political upheaval in Russia often came with stunning speed. And he predicts that could happen again. Should the West start preparing for a Russia ohne Putin?
Well, how do you prepare for that situation? I mean, it's unforeseeable because this person has been in charge for such a long time, I mean, for 20 years now, more than 20 years. But it's true that a military defeat has brought sweeping change in Russia many times. I mean, we've seen it after the defeat in Afghanistan. It opened new possibilities for the opposition, but also for opposition within the system to come up and try something else. If it's going to be the hardliners, the nationalists that Vladimir just mentioned, we don't know. It doesn't have to be a turn for the better.
Yes, absolutely. I've grown up in the Soviet Union, and the war in Afghanistan was this elephant in the room. No one was talking about this openly, but this kind of people are not being happy with the government on different levels was supported by the war in Afghanistan. It was one of the key factors in this self-destruction of the Soviet Union. So I see the risks of the war in the Ukraine to inflict this kind of self-destructions on the Russian politics and the Russian society, because people, at some point, this feeling of the people not being happy with what's going on in the country, and they cannot fix it on war, on politics and so on, but this general feeling of not being happy is increasing.
Mm-hmm. The historian that I mentioned, Vladimir Karamurza, says in this article that the collapse of Putin's regime is a question not of if, but when. Can you wager any kind of estimate of what a post-Putin Russia might look like, what direction it could go in?
We don't know it all. This is so much unknowns in this. And it's long. If you look back at the Russian history, every previous Russian leader was followed by someone by a very surprise. So no one was expecting Gorbachev appearing, no one was expecting Yeltsin appearing, and no one was expecting Putin appearing. So the next one state leader would be someone I would expect who is not expected right now. We know the name of the person. It will be someone from the actual establishment, I would expect. It would be not someone from the Mars and from foreign country. But the name will be a surprise.
Vendeline, coming back to the effects on the war, there's been some rising concern here in Germany and elsewhere in the West that a Putin with his back to the wall might be more likely to escalate, as you have indicated, possibly including with tactical nuclear weapons. Is that a serious risk, do you think?
I do think it's a risk. You know, we cannot just exclude it. We cannot say it won't happen. But Putin, in his own way of thinking, has so far been very rational in his, considering his worldview. And I think in that sense, if we think he's acting rationally, it's unlikely that he will go as far as that.
Certainly, yeah, sorry.
But just one point. Putin or Russian political system is completely thinking outside of the box. So what we expect in the West is not always what's happening in Russia. And Putin is a man of the big surprises. So he's open and often make things which no one expects from him. And we should brace for more surprises.
One surprise he did not deliver, Jörg, this week was Chancellor Scholz's request that Putin withdraw the troops from Ukraine. In a telephone call, Putin made it very clear that he has no regrets whatsoever about the invasion and would do it all over again. Would you say that Chancellor Scholz was right to give diplomacy a chance at this moment in time? And where do you think things could go from here?
I think so. It's right to make these calls. I mean, no surprises in the answer Putin gave, obviously, but it's important for also a domestic reason for Scholz. He has to make clear to the German public that he's trying everything, especially if we expect, and I do expect, that we will have to send more heavy weapons at some point. And then being able to say, look, I tried everything. I talked to him. I presented my case, and he wouldn't answer. So is a better position to escalate in terms of weapons.
Those repeated attacks on Ukrainian infrastructure that Vendeline mentioned earlier, including most recently on Ukraine's water supply, indicate that Putin is hardly ready to call it quits. We have this report.
In Kharkiv and other Ukrainian cities in the east of the country, the Russians caused a blackout, according to eyewitness reports. The result, widespread power outages plunging entire areas and millions of civilians into darkness. Without light, without heat, without internet, and even without water, as pumps run on electricity. And in Europe too, like here in Lille, France, people are trying to prepare for a possible blackout as a result of the Russian energy war, with energy-saving measures and further safety precautions ahead of the upcoming winter. But energy prices are climbing to ever new dizzying heights. For many consumers and businesses, the situation is becoming increasingly threatening, even without a blackout. How well is Europe prepared for this winter?
And I'll put that question straight away to Vendeline, but I'm going to broaden it out a bit and ask you, how well prepared do you think Europe is to stay the course, also in terms of support for Ukraine, if the Russian energy war on the West does turn things dark and cold here, as well as in Ukraine?
I think Europe is relatively well prepared, and we will get through this winter. Let me just start with saying that in Germany, gas storage facilities are pretty much full. I mean, much fuller than we expected them to be at this point. Industry, for instance, in Germany and other countries have shown that they can save quite a lot of energy, much more than they thought. Individuals, we are all supposed to save energy, and we can do even more. It'll be tough. It'll for sure be tough, but I don't even think there'll be gas rationing. It depends, of course, how cold the winter will be, and that's something we don't know. But let's assume it's a normal winter, normal temperatures. We will be okay. It won't be easy, but we'll be okay.
Vladimir, a central question that has arisen also due to this counteroffensive is whether Germany will sustain its military support for Ukraine. Germany is now under increasing pressure once again to deliver more and heavier weapons to Ukraine. But Russia's ambassador to Germany said this week that, if anything, Germany has done way too much. And in fact, he used the term red line, saying that Germany's support to date has already crossed a red line. What is he trying to say with that? Is that simply a rhetorical device, or could it mean that Russia is aiming to punish Germany with some additional?
We don't know it yet, because we don't know if it be any blackouts in Germany inflicted from outside. I could not exclude this possibility of such events on the German soil, which is the Russian ambassador said, using the word red line, it's that Germany is now, from a Russian part of view, is a part of the conflict, a part of this war on the side of the Ukraine, as the whole Western world, the whole NATO and the United States, because NATO and the United States and Germany delivering weapons to the Ukraine, enabled Ukraine to push Russia back. So it's not that the Western world is outside of this conflict, and it's like war between Russia and the Ukraine. From the Russian point of view, it's a war between Russia and the rest of the world, liberal, democratic world, united, and the NATO, European Union, or you call it.
In fact, U.S. military advisors are said to have played a key strategic role working with Ukraine to design this counteroffensive. Jörg, let me ask you about something that Chancellor Scholz said this week. He said he again rejected requests that Germany send its Marder and Leopard battle tanks, and said, in fact, Germany's high-performance weapons that it has already sent have been very, very helpful on the battlefield. Is his defensiveness on this point, is it really justified, or do you think that Germany could and should do more right now?
I think we could do more, and I think Chancellor Scholz could build on what he stated, that the weapons we sent really make a difference on the battlefield. So, and they are even more lethal than the ones that are asked for now. The Marders, basically infantry fighting vehicles with small cannons mounted on top. They're not as lethal as the Panzerhaubitze 2000 we already delivered. So I don't see why saying we already sent weapons and now we're going to go slow makes really sense. I think the argument that we are not going to go alone is valid, but it doesn't have to be us going alone. We can take the initiative and bring along NATO partners. So, and I think that's what the US also wants in this phase of the war. That's how I understand the American ambassador saying it's a sovereign decision by Germany. Just don't wait for us to make a decision.
If you look at per capita contributions to Ukraine, Germany, of course, is more populous than many other European countries. It's also an industrial powerhouse, and yet its contributions fall significantly short of what a number of other countries have done. Vendeline.
That's right. I mean, for instance, Poland has done much more than Germany and other countries too, the Baltic states. But Germany is sort of in the middle, you know, even considering its size, its strength, its population. America, of course, has done much, much more. So I don't think Germany's done so badly. And one thing Germany sent, which is enormously useful and doesn't really get a lot of that is not mentioned a lot, is IRIS-T. It's basically like the Israeli dome. It's very fancy technology, a missile defense shield, and it's something the Bundeswehr can't afford because it's so pricey. But we sent it to Germany, sent it to Ukraine. So I think Germany is sometimes also underplaying a little bit how much it is doing.
Absolutely, and Germany has a huge transformation in the public opinion in the last 6 months in terms of weapon delivery to the Ukraine, to the conflict zone. And I would not compare the spendings by the Baltic states, by Poland and by the US. They have completely different story of relationship historically, Poland and Baltic states, to Russia as Germany. The population of Baltic states are not that kind of pacifistic like in Germany. There's such broad consensus in the society, like in Germany, about pacifism. And this is a huge factor in domestic and in foreign politics in Germany.
Nonetheless, there is a lot of concern in this country. I mentioned Germany being an industrial powerhouse. Well, after World War II, the U.S. Secretary of Treasury, who was a hardline anti-German, proposed a plan that would have seen the complete de-industrialization of Germany so that it could never wage war again. And that word is now being used here by citizens and media who say that perhaps Putin will achieve what Morgenthau didn't. Is that a true risk, Vendeline?
I've just written about this for The Economist, and it's Morgenthau's revenge. It's not a risk that Mr. Morgenthau's plans to really completely deindustrialize Germany, and he wrote a book, Germany is Our Problem, in 1945. That will not happen. But some companies will go under and some companies will go abroad. So a certain, small-scale deindustrialization is a real risk, and that's why people are so worried about it.
Jörg, is the government doing enough to ward that off?
Well, they're trying. I think we haven't seen the end of it. The measures that have been taken are mostly directed at consumers at the moment and individual households to shield them from the consequences of this economic warfare. Much more will have to be done for companies. And but Germany is still in a good position to do this, so I'm not defeatist.
Let me come back to our title before we end the show. As you remember, Ukraine's battlefield gains, Putin under pressure, is our title. Let me ask all of you very briefly, as you look ahead now after this counteroffensive, are you more hopeful that the end of this war is in sight? Vladimir?
No, not at all. The worst is yet to come.
Vendeline?
Sadly, I'm with Vladimir that I think there will be escalation, but I am more hopeful about the strength of the Ukrainian military. It's totally impressive what they've shown us.
Jörg?
I'm more hopeful. I think Ukraine can shore up more support that way, and I'm very hopeful that something will change also in Russia in the debate about the war.
Thank you very much to all of you for being with us today, and thanks to all of you in our audience for tuning in. See you soon.